Okay, welcome everybody to this coffee break. We are here with the wonderful Jim Nix, who I've known for a while now, I think quite a few years.
Yeah.
Jim is a fantastic landscape photographer, wonderful person, great teacher, and we're really excited to have him here with us. So I'm going to go ahead and let Jim introduce himself and sit back and relax and enjoy. This should be a really great webinar today. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Thanks, Laurie. Appreciate it. In fact, I had a bio page I was going to put up here. Tell me if you can see that little bio page.
We do. Everybody see that? Looks thumbs up. Yep.
Okay.
It's good.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm Jim. If I haven't met you before, I'm a photographer based down in Austin, Texas, and been doing this about 15 years now. I was trying to write something up recently and I was like, when did I really kind of start this? And I was like, oh, wow, time flies. And for about 10 years, I've been sharing like tips and tricks. I started kind of on my blog, what used to be a blog. It's not really much of a blog anymore, but I was doing a lot of blogging back in the day, and I started sharing tutorials and tips and tricks and just kind of doing some education because I'd get a lot of questions about my photographs and what I did. And back then, a lot of it was HDR. But now it's just a lot of things, including some HDR. But anyway, so then I started a YouTube channel. So I sort of morphed from just being a photographer to being kind of a photography educator or instructor. And, you know, I hate to use the word YouTuber. It's kind of what I am in some regard, but I don't know why when I say YouTuber, it makes me think of some young kid running around doing something crazy. And that's clearly not me. And I'm also an ambassador for Skylum and do a lot of work with them. And in fact, today I'll be talking about how I'm using Mylio and why I'm using Mylio and just how much I like it and what I like about it. And then I'll pop from there over to Luminar, do a quick edit and show how I'm kind of keeping things in sync. So we'll get into that. That's a picture of me from Utah. I presented actually for the Luminar team at the Outsiders Photo Conference, which was in Kanab, Utah, last month. And so I was up there and I was out shooting with Vanelli from Skylum, and he's got a good friend named Scott Kelby. You've probably heard of Kelby. Kelby was with us, so it was great to meet him. And then another guy who's a great friend of mine named Matt Seuss. Many of you may know Matt. Anyway, we were out shooting there. So Matt took that photo of me. But you can kind of see what I shoot: landscapes, cityscapes. I do a little bit of street photography, but more of a kind of wide angle street photography, not like what you might think of like, oh, I walk up in someone's face with a camera. I can't do that. I would never do that. Can't imagine if someone did that to me, how I'd react. So I wouldn't do that to someone else. It's kind of what I call travel photography. Anyway, you can see down below some of my links if you want to follow along with my stuff, for lack of a better word. My website, also, because I do a lot with the Luminar team and the Skylum team, I actually do give away a preset pack. It's 10 presets for Luminar Neo if you join my newsletter, which you can do on my website there. But what we're talking about today is Mylio and using that in combination with Luminar. So can you confirm that you're also seeing the Mylio screen now, Laurie? Is that?
Yes, looks
Okay.
good.
Cool. And also, I just want to say, if you've ever been on webinars with me, hopefully you know this already, but I'm super informal. This is, for lack of a better word, a demonstration, and you could argue that it's a little bit of a presentation, but I don't want it to be just me talking at you. I hope it's a conversation. So by all means, if anybody can, maybe Laurie, if you could let me know if there's questions in the chat and things like that, I'd love to make it a conversation and not just have me talking at you, so to speak. So yeah, I got first turned on a Mylio probably a year and a half ago. Maybe a year ago, I can't remember exactly, but at first I was like, yeah, that's kind of interesting. And it remains kind of interesting, but in reality for me, it's become incredibly interesting because as I've used it more, and to be clear, I do not want to imply that I'm an expert or that I use it in a super advanced way or anything like that, but it's just so useful. And it's really become something that I just love, even though I haven't finished, for lack of a better word, doing everything that I want to do, like geotagging images and adding keywords and things like that. And as photographers, we're kind of never finished with that anyway. But I have a ways to go. But there's so much in Mylio that's so useful. And the Skylum product, which I'll show today briefly, it's a great product for editing. The catalog is not super advanced, which is fine, and maybe that'll change over time. But using Mylio in combination with Luminar, I feel like just kind of as you take kind of the best of both worlds. Mylio does such an incredible job with the things that we're going to talk about, and of course, Luminar I think is great at editing. So putting them together is fantastic. And what you can kind of see here is basically every photo I've ever taken, which is like 300 and something thousand photos. So I have up here in the upper left, 200 and let's call it 300,000 photos. These are my photos, right? In air quotes there, by which I mean my real photos. These are photos I've taken with my real cameras as I've gone to places and blah, blah, blah. So there's, a few 100,000 of those. And then what I've done in the last few years is start, I was dealing with a lot of photos on my device, right? Same thing you're probably dealing with. And so I'm an Apple person, as you can kind of tell, because that says Apple Photos, and you can probably tell this is a Mac I'm on. But I realized that I had hard drives full of iPhone photos from my iPhone 3, and then my 4, and then my 6, and then my 7, and then whatever. And I was like, what am I going to do with these things? And by the way, like, what even are these photos? I had no idea. So I made an effort to get thousands of photos put in folders on and all these different hard drives, collapse them into a single hard drive. So I did that. And then over the last couple of years, I've been doing, which is this Apple Photos thing right here. I've been taking all my iPhone photos and just dumping them into Apple Photos. And so I use Apple Photos not for anything other than just to store my iPhone shots. And to be clear, I'm not really approaching iPhone photography in a super serious way. As you can see here, this is like a lacrosse game that my daughter was at in high school a few years ago. I've got a whole lot of those kind of things in Apple Photos, as well as pictures of a menu, the same kind of stuff you might have a photo. Maybe my dog does something funny. So these are not photos that anybody needs to see, but nonetheless, they're things that I wanted to be aware of. So I was able to connect to Apple Photos, which is great because I can look at those, but I can also go over here to my external drive and look up these old photos, and they're all categorized and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm getting at here is I just love that Mylio is connecting me to every photo I've ever taken, regardless of where it's stored. Because in the past, I was in Aperture, and then for various reasons, not the least of which is Apple quit making it, I had to move and I went to Lightroom. And for various reasons, Adobe makes great products, to be clear, but for various reasons, I wasn't super happy with the Lightroom catalog. So I kind of quit using it. And I've kind of been bouncing around maybe over the last few years, trying to figure out how to manage this growing, group of photos that I had on all these devices from all these different cameras and all these different hard drives. And so Mylio has really become the answer for me. So that's what all that is. But like if I go back into here, I can, and some of this is just old family stuff. And one of the nice things I like about it is I've got all these previews on my phone, just like you do if you're using Mylio. So our daughter is now a sophomore in college, lives in Oregon. We live in Texas. We were up there recently and I was talking to her about some old photos. And then I was like, hey, you know what I can do? I can bring them up because I have the Mylio app. So I just brought up Mylio and I was going through some of those old photos, which were taken 10, 15 years ago, and even some that were 20 years old. And I was looking at them on the Mylio app on my phone with my daughter, and we're kind of walking down memory lane. So it's a great discovery tool, a great search tool. It's great for family memory. I mean, these are things that if you're already using Mylio, you're well aware of that. But I just love that. And then I've got a couple of other folders here that are just on my desktop, which is MacBook Pro, as you can see. I've got 740 images in this demo files folder, which is really just a collection of images, some kind of random, but these are images that just sit on my desktop. And whenever I open an app to go do some editing tests that I might be using in a future YouTube video, often the tests are done on the images in this folder. So that's just a keeper there. I've got some Iceland images. And then today on coffee break, I've got this folder as well. But also wanted to point out Mylio Inbox, which there is a photo in that. You can see that photo, and that one represents the quantity, of course, but we'll be talking about that here in a second. But a couple of the other things that I really like about Mylio is this calendar view, right? So I can go back to, hey, we were in Europe in 2001. This is an old film camera, and I took some photos, not very many. I wasn't really a photographer back then, and took a few photos, but I always wanted to have everything in one place. So I love the decade view here and how you can just pop in and take a look at all the photos from any place. And so, maybe I pop into these by year and by month, and you understand how it works, as you already know if you're a user. It is a great discovery platform, and this is looking at everything. So this could be lots of different things, but it's all just clean and easy to use. So I love that view. I love the map view. I've been fortunate to travel. I've been to Europe quite a few times. You can see there's a number of places in Europe where I've geotagged the photos and located them. And I have still plenty more to do, but it's just super useful. Same with the States, of course. Being an American, I've, of course, traveled to lots of places around the country. And so I've tagged quite a few of those, and there's more as you zoom in, but I've got a lot more to do. But the point is super useful, as you know, and I just love that. And again, this is something I don't really get out of other apps, right? Which is so nice. People, right? If I was a portrait photographer, which I'm not, but I have gone to some portrait events and taken some, and I'm working on some portrait photograph. I'm practicing, for lack of a better word, simply because it's an area that I haven't really spent any time on. So I'm trying to get better at it, but you can tag people, which is great. And then you can make albums, and I love the dashboard, and I'm particular love the stats. I love to come in here and look at the different cameras. I can see the different file types. There's 325,000 photos. The cameras that I've used, right? There's lots of different things. This is what I'm talking about, all these different iPhones, right? So, and some of these are my wife's old iPhones. And so again, having all this in one place is just super useful and interesting, frankly. And then lenses, just all the different things. I just love all that. And then even keywords, right? Also, I just love that you can click in here. Like I love this 20 millimeter f1.8. And hey, guess what? It just takes me in and I can look at all the photo I've taken with that lens. So it's super fun and useful. And that's one of the things I love is that dashboard, just to have some intelligence. And I don't necessarily study, my analytics, but I think it's super useful to be able to know those kind of things. So that's some of the things that I like about Mylio. It's a great way to have a view of your photographic life, regardless of where the images are. So I love that. Here's a few images, and I'll just do one of these because this is not really about editing, but I also love that Mylio can be that layer. I hate to use that word because you might think it's Photoshop layers, but to be that layer on top of all of my photos and giving me that view. And then regardless of what app I want to use to go edit in, I can get to it. So I have this photo highlighted and I can click on photo and then, open with, and because I make a lot of YouTube videos, I have a lot of apps, some of which I use a lot, some of which I don't use very often, but I have all these different apps. And so I can go get to wherever it is I need to get to. But I'm going to open with Luminar Neo. And I always shoot in RAW when I'm shooting my, I'm going to use the word real photos here, as opposed to I generally shoot JPEGs on the iPhone, even though I can shoot RAW there. But iPhones I just treat as kind of like quick snaps and kind of memories, whereas I take my my images with my Sony a bit more seriously. Anyway, RAW files, right? I want to do that. I want to click continue, and this should pop us over. And can you see that, Laurie? Did it open properly?
It sure did. Yeah,
did.
we can
Okay,
see it.
perfect.
Looks great.
Okay,
Great.
perfect. Awesome. Okay, so here's an image from Iceland, and there's probably a lot that I would do to this photo. I won't waste everybody's time by doing a massive amount of edits, but one of the things I may do is just start with a preset. And this is actually the preset pack that you get for free if you join my newsletter that I mentioned at the beginning. But one of the cool things is you can hover over these. It's just that they're still building the previews, and hover over the preview, or excuse me, hover over the preset and get a preview of it. But it's a little slow with the bandwidth here on Zoom, I guess. So I'm just going to go ahead and click one of these and see if we can get that preset to apply here. So that is still, there you go. So something like that, just again, as the preset implies, It's a basic pop. It gave a little bit of oomph to the image, but what I want to do is come in and do a little bit more. So then I would generally go from there over to the edit tab, where I would come in and start to really kind of refine my edit. So I'm now over here, and maybe there's a couple of things I want to do. One of the things I like to do is play with super contrast, which gives me just an amazing amount of control over the light in an image. And if any of you have seen my Luminar videos, you'll see me use this tool on probably just about every image, simply because it's just really incredibly powerful, and it gives you great control over the different tonal areas, which I'm a fan of. So I'm going to do a little bit like that. It's not a massive change from that to that, but I like it. And I'm going to open develop. And I think what I want to do is slightly, first I want to get a mask, and I'm going to get a linear gradient. And what I want to do is just work a little bit on the foreground here. So I'm just going to stick this gradient up here and kind of spread out the feathering on that edge a little bit, maybe something about like that. And then I'm going to come in here to adjustments, and I'm just going to play around a little bit and check on adjusting contrast. It creates a little bit more drama, which I like. I'm going to add a little bit of warmth to get slightly some of that blue slightly removed, maybe a tiny bit of tint as well. I tend to like that magenta tone a little bit on my, this was a sunrise, but anything kind of golden hour, sunrise and sunsets, I kind of like that. Maybe a little bit of vibrance, maybe something about like that. And let me see about the shadows, maybe pull those down, create a little bit more contrast. Again, I'm just working on the bottom half of the photo because of the mask that I use. But, you know, making a little bit of progress. Maybe I'll come in with a golden hour tool and just apply that across the entire image. Adds a nice golden pop to the whole thing. And then I think maybe I will use a little bit of structure AI, which gives it a little bit of crunch. And again, I use a gradient similar to what I did before. And, you know, again, this is kind of a demo edit, for lack of a better word, just kind of walking through a few things that I would do. Give that a little bit of structure. You can see how that kind of brings up some of that intensity. And then maybe I'll just wrap it up with a little bit of split toning in the highlights, just to give it a little bit more of that warmth in the highlights, pop some of those warmer areas, maybe something like that. And, you know, you can always, by the way, I see a spot there. I'm not going to take the spots out, but you can do that, in fact, automatically in Luminar with just a click of a button. But since we're all friends here and it's just a demo, I won't make you wait on me to do that. But if you look at the before, you know, you have the power to really edit an image and have a huge impact. There it is before, and there it is after. And honestly, I'd probably play around and do a few other things, but just wanted to give you an example of how I'm using these products together. So this is where kind of the magic comes in of using these two together. I need to move the zoom window, sorry. And that's in the upper right-hand corner. When you export, when you click that, I click disk, but I don't want to save it to my disk. And in fact, what I want to do in this drop down, there's an option for the Mylio inbox. And you may remember I showed you the inbox that had one photo in it earlier. I'm going to go ahead and click Mylio inbox. And I want to adjust my settings here because I started with the raw file. So I want to save this as a TIFF. And I tend to prefer Pro Photo. And then this is 72. We want to change that, you know, let's call it 300. And let's just hit, I don't need any transparency, 16-bit. I'm going to leave the same file name, and I'm going to hit save. And so it's going to drop that into my Mylio inbox. And then what I want to do, as soon as that's finished exporting and dropping into the inbox, I want to go back over to Mylio and add that, or sync it basically with that folder. So let's see here, give this a second. It always takes a little longer over Zoom, so my apologies for that delay. Should be done here any minute. I'll take a drink of water while it's doing that. That didn't work. Like in a restaurant, you know, right? You excuse yourself to go to the restroom before the food comes, and the food always shows up. I was hoping that was going to happen when I took a sip of the water, but it didn't really work. So,
Jim, I got a question for you.
please.
Is there an official name for these pieces of ice that you see in water?
Ice chunks.
Ice
There's
cubes.
not. Yeah, they're awesome. Let's see, what are they called? No, they're just chunks of ice. So there's a not very far from here, there's a big glacier. And then there's right next to the glacier, of course, there's a big lagoon. And so what happens is that chunks of ice calve, right? They fall off the glacier and then they go into the glacial lagoon and they basically float through the lagoon. And then there's like a little river that leads out to the beach and they end up on the beach. And so these are just chunks of glacial ice that have broken off from the glacier, floated through the lagoon, and made their way to the beach. And the beach is called Diamond Beach because, as you saw from the photo, it looks like diamonds when the light hits it, I guess. So yeah, it's a beautiful place in southern Iceland. Can you see my Mylio screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. So now you see my Mylio inbox has a 2, and that's because there's 2 photos in it, including the one we just edited. And so if I click on that, you can see it's a TIFF and blah, 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 same kind of stuff. And so this is the photo that we just played with. And it shows you when I shot it. This was in February of 2020 on the first Iceland trip. And then, of course, you've got all the capability here of adding keywords, categorizing things, you know, all that kind of stuff. I just love having that stuff at your fingertips. But what I like to do is once that photo is here, I want to drop it back into the other folder. So I right click and I click move to folder for this photo. So move to photo, or excuse me, folder. And then I just got to find that one. And that is called Coffee Break. Oops, not Iceland Demos, Coffee Break. And I hit select. And now it's gone. So when I go back here and I go into Coffee Break, now there's a 5 instead of 4. If I click on it, there's my my edit along with my original. And so that's how I like to use these 2 together, because it helps me keep track of my original, which is untouched and still sitting there on my hard drive and being looked at by Mylio. But then I've made an edit and done all the fun that I had over in Luminar and then synced it back. And so I've got original RAW and then an edited TIFF. And then should I want to, I could, you know, go do more stuff in other apps or, you know, whatever. The other cool thing is it also ends up being in a folder in Luminar called single image edits where it sits. And so you've kind of got a copy of it there as well, if you want to. So that's kind of how I'm using the 2 together. I mean, it's pretty straightforward and simple. And like I said at the beginning, it's not like some amazing or advanced tip that you've never heard of, but it's, the point is really that it works so well. And it just really allows you to keep track of things. And for me, one of the things that I really like is the ability to kind of quickly browse all my images on, you know, again, wherever they are, and then go do whatever edits I want to do in any app, because as I showed you before, I can just link from here over to another app, send a photo, do whatever. Maybe it's noise reduction in Topaz, or maybe it's something in Photoshop or whatever it might be, and then come back and keep track of that. And I love the oversight, I guess, and the really the management. I mean, it is like a super DAM, right? A super digital asset manager, Mylio here, and it just works so well. So yeah, that was that. I see some chat. Do you want me to go through these, Laurie? I think I can bring them up, but then you're probably gonna see them.
I'm
okay.
kind of going
Got
through
it.
a few of them.
Got it. Okay, I'll let you do
Let's
that.
see,
Then.
Mark, you had a question about the file in Luminar. Maybe you could ask that to
Yeah.
Jim. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you like.
Yeah, Jim, the question I've got is the file that stays in Luminar is basically the original raw file with edits. So what I have been doing in the past is backing up the Luminar catalog separately, as well as keeping my original, as well as keeping the modified TIFF. Is that kind of a recommended flow, or do you not worry about the old raw at that point?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't really worry about the stuff that's left in Luminar, simply because I know this is going to perhaps sound really weird, but I can look at a photo, my original and my edit, and sort of, because I use Luminar so much and I'm just familiar with it, I feel like I can kind of figure out what I did. So even if I lost the edit in Luminar, if I have the final TIFF and the raw, by looking at the 2, I can honestly kind of piece it together. You know, it may not be exact, but I feel like I could replicate that photo pretty easily if I needed to. I think it's a great idea. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, you don't ever go back in and re-edit it later?
Sometimes
because
I do.
You'd have to start over again if you lose that raw.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, no, so I mean, I keep the original RAW, obviously that's on my drive, right, in Mylio.
Right.
So I have that, but even if I were to lose the one in Luminar, to me, it's, honestly, it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't matter. It does matter. Here's what it comes down to. I'm a complete nerd about editing photos, and I like it so much. So if somebody came to me and said, I really want to buy that image, and for some reason I didn't have it, but I had a vision of what it looks like because they said, here it is. And it was just a small JPEG that they found on Facebook. And I have the raw file. I feel like I could just say, okay, I can get that file to you in 30 minutes. And I feel like I could go redo it. And honestly, I just like editing photos so much. I'm kind of nerdy about it. It's just fun. Like some people don't want to spend the time on the computer. I absolutely love it, spending the time on the computer. So I don't worry about it, but I'm a weirdo probably. It makes perfect sense what you're doing, and that is much wiser way to approach it. Yes, so I completely agree that what you're doing is the right thing to do. I'm just saying that I don't do it, but I don't worry about it because if I have to re-edit something, and it's not like I'm really going to lose everything because I've got a backed up copy of the final in a TIFF. So if someone says, I like that, but I want it slightly different, I would just start over and make it slightly different. So that's not really an answer, but
That's all right. I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's just fun to edit photo. I just like it, right? I like playing around with all these apps. As you could see here, when I went and said, open in, you can see all the different apps that I have. So I'm always just hacking around in different apps and playing just because it's kind of fun, to be honest. So yeah, good question.
All right. Jim, there's a question from Margaret who's asking, is Luminar meant as an alternative to Photoshop?
Yeah, hi, Margaret. Yeah, great question. I kind of feel like, and this was more true a year ago. It's still true today, but anyway, I kind of feel like if Photoshop and Lightroom got together and had a child, Luminar would kind of be like that child. Plus, they added AI to it. Now, since then, they've added AI with like AI sky replacement in Photoshop, and they've added much more advanced masking in Lightroom, which they used to not have. So it's not the exact same analogy, maybe not a great one, but is it meant to be that? I think it's definitely an alternative. I used to use Lightroom all the time. I don't really open it that much, simply because I don't feel like I need to. And Photoshop, I've never been a huge Photoshop user. I mean, I have it and I can kind of use it, but I never really spent a lot of time because I was always in other apps. And so I just kind of ended up building my photo workflow around other apps like Luminar. So is it meant to be a replacement? I think it can absolutely be a replacement depending on what you want to do. You don't have this same level of capability around layers that you have in Photoshop. You don't have the same number of blend modes. You don't have all the text and all the kind of things like that you can do. So it just depends. If you're just doing straight up photo edits with limited layers capability, but you want really powerful photo edits, you could use Luminar instead of Photoshop or Lightroom for sure. It's almost more like if you had Lightroom, but added some additional AI capability, some new tools, make it easier to use, and add layers. That's kind of what Luminar is. It's more closely aligned to Lightroom than it is Photoshop, except it does have layers, which of course Lightroom doesn't have. So, gosh, that's another question I don't feel like I provided an answer for. Does that come close to answering your question? Do you have another version or a qualifying version of that question you want to ask me? I'm happy to talk about it. I don't know if I'm actually answering your question or not.
While she's thinking about it, there's a couple of questions, so I'm just going to kind of address this. Sure. If you make changes in Luminar, let's say you make changes within Mylio, what's going to happen is there's going to be what's called a sidecar file that gets created. It's an you'll see it as .xmp. And what this does is it stores the edits either in your photo or in your metadata. And so what Jim has over here, he's pulling up Mylio on the right-hand side, actually. You can see there's metadata there. So that travels, that's an extra file. You don't want to delete it because it travels with your image. And a few people were asking about that. So that would be an XMP. If you make a change, it should show up there. So hopefully that addresses it.
Yeah, so there's the 4 raw files and then there's the TIFF. You're talking about if you if you edit and get that XMP sidecar. Is that what you meant, Laurie?
Yeah,
Yeah, if you edit in
any
Luminar.
edits. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's called non-destructive. So now you always keep your original file. You can always go back to it, but those edits have been applied.
Right.
And so don't delete those XMP files.
Yeah.
There's a question from Darren. Darren, you wanted go ahead and unmute yourself. You're asking Jim about the size of his vault.
Kia ora, both of you from New Zealand. Hi there, Jim. I have a couple of questions. I saw the size of your catalog, and it is quite a large one, like mine. What do you use in the way of your vault storage? I mean, what sort of vault storage size drive would you have?
Yeah, if you look down here, I've got an 18 terabyte external drive. It's a G drive
Yes.
from G Technology, I think it's called.
Mhm.
Which I think everything is Western Digital these days. Didn't they buy
Yeah.
like everybody? I've had G drives for years. So I've got all of these photos on this 18 terabyte drive. And then I have 3 other 10 terabyte G drives. And all the photos are backed up on those as well. So I have like my main drive, the 18 terabyte, which I edit from, etc. And then I have 3 more copies of my photos on 3 different drives. And I keep those all in a fireproof, waterproof safe in the office here. I have not gotten around to doing cloud storage. I really feel like I'm supposed to, but and I don't have any problems with the cloud. I'm a fan actually of cloud computing and things like that. I just haven't done it. So yeah, I've got all the backup copies I think I need, but sometimes I wonder I should probably do one offsite. But yeah.
So would you consider those backup copies your masters, for example? You would have them, or are they a copy of your 18 terabyte drive?
Yeah, well, so I mean, they're the original raw files. Is that what?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. No, that's good.
Yeah.
The second question to that then, do you have a vault? If we were to look at, for example, your devices, would we see a vault? And have you created a portion of that as a vault? Yes, you have the whole thing. Yep.
Yeah, I just use that as the vault.
Right. Okay.
But it probably makes sense for me to have a second vault and also to get some things in the cloud. It's something I keep thinking about it. It's, it's on the list of to-dos that is,
Sure.
longer than a giraffe's neck at this point.
That's good.
Yeah, but
no, that's cool. Thank you. You've answered my questions around the storage. In addition to that, I noticed you have an Apple folder or an app. I think it was, is it the Apple folder, Apple Photos? Is that something you created, that Apple Photos folder? I know there is an Apple Photos folder, I believe, within Mylio. Or did you just put everything into that folder, all of your iPhone photos that you had?
Yeah, so I just connected Apple Photos and basically made this folder from that. So everything that, I mean, this goes, these are old photos that I've like saved from probably Flickr that I maybe was sharing. And then I've got random iPhone shots and family stuff, and it just goes on and on and on, right? So going back a number of years, this is all done. Hey, Vegemite. Don't eat it. It's terrible. It is the worst food of all time. This was in Sydney, Australia a number of years ago.
Comes from down under.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, that's kind of fun. So yeah, this is just a duplicate of everything that I had in Apple Photos at the time. But since then, and that was a couple of months ago, probably when I created that and dumped all that in there. But since then, I've been on probably 3 different trips, and so I've got hundreds more to add, both to get off my phone and dump into Apple Photos, but then also to sync over here. So that's
good.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I just use Apple Photos as, I hate to say a dumping ground, but it's essentially just a dumping ground for test photos, quick snaps, maybe some family stuff. I take photos when I'm out shooting with my real gear, and I might share them socially, but I don't consider that. I hate to say they're not real photos because of course they're real, but I don't know, just the quality is not the same as with my full frame Sony. And so I don't want to be a pixel snob, but like when I zoom in on my Apple iPhone shots, I'm like, and it's a pretty good camera, really. But then when you start zooming in, I'm like, it's not as good. It's a little soft everywhere, So I don't take my iPhone shooting as serious as some people do. But
I also use my 12 Pro. I noticed you had a 12 Pro. I use it as well. And I was recently at an event, and it's so handy to transfer from your camera through to the photos, a nice shot of an aircraft, which might look like this on the iPhone, but looks like that, and transfer it and then post it. And I do. So I do exactly what you do with your phone. Yeah.
Good point.
Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Yes, sir. You bet.
So Jonathan is asking about an easy way to find different file types, cameras, and lenses. Jim, would you mind going back to your dashboard, top of the screen?
Sure.
Go ahead and click on there.
I can hear.
And yep, that's it. So as you can see, if he clicks on cameras, for instance, well, there's file types. That's one of your questions.
Yeah, okay.
But you can click on file types, and you can see all the different file types that he's got. And then if he clicks on cameras, for instance, there's going to be a whole list. Yeah, and if he clicks on any of those, it'll pull up all those images for that particular camera or lens. You can pull up keywords.
Yep.
And I was telling Jim the other day, I remember the camera that I used to photograph, if I go traveling. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just pull the camera up and go, I know that I took it with the D800E or something like that. And then I could just pull it up there. So that's really handy, handy feature there.
Yeah. Here's keywords, right? So, and to be clear, like, as I said at the beginning, like you're never done adding keywords or like geotagging. And so a lot of these images just need to have that done. And I just haven't taken the time to do it. So I tend to organize, as you can tell from my folder. Maybe I didn't talk about this, but like my quote unquote real photos, which is this collection here, I organize by location. So by the way, I have another 50,000 old iPhone shots here, but like I have this US travel. And so within this, I've just got countless trips to different places in the US where I've taken photos. So I name them usually based on the location and then the date. And like Europe, I've got a folder here for Europe. And then in that there's 80 folders for 80 different locations in Europe that I've shot going back to 2001 when I took my first like quote unquote real adult trip. But like these are all my different trips to various places in Europe over the years. And, I just organize that way. A lot of people organize by year first and then by, whatever. I don't. I organize by basically country or city and then date. And I don't know. For me, I tend to remember. I'm like, oh, okay. I know when I got that shot, it was blah, blah, blah. And so it's easy for me to find stuff, but that doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. It's just how I do it. So, and then we got Iceland photos down here from the last couple of Iceland trips. There's the ponies, Laurie, that we talked about. So, yeah. So just how I like to order, or I should say organize. And then, miscellaneous things in Texas, Central America, Sydney, different things like that. So I just organize by geography and then by date normally. But to the question about stuff like keywords, I haven't gone in and done enough keywording. I just need to take the time, and it's, as you know, fairly time consuming. And so getting all that done is just going to take me a while, but yeah.
Jonathan says, thank you. That is perfect. He thinks it's amazing. He didn't realize that you could go in and, find different cameras and lenses and such. So glad we could share that with you. That's great.
Yeah, it's really cool. In fact, I've talked to people before. I'm like, my favorite lens is the thing. I've shot more photos without lens. And then I go in and look and I'm like, no, I haven't even come close. Like one of my favorite lenses is this 20 millimeter f1.8 for my Sony. I love it. And I've taken 3,000 photos with it. And I would have sworn I've taken 20 because I feel like it's my favorite lens. And so it's just kind of funny. Like I said, it may or may not mean a whole lot to you to go through some of this, but it's just interesting how you can learn things about your photographic preferences. Because it's also, if you're in a rationalization mode, which is, hey, I got too much stuff. I got a closet full of stuff. Do I even use this? You could come in and say, well, do I ever even use whatever, this 24 millimeter f2.8. I've only got less than 1,000 photos with it out of 300,000. So, now, it doesn't mean you got to sell it, but it's just a good way to kind of know what your habits are, which I think it's informative. If you know what you do and what you like and what you use, then it's kind of useful. So anyway.
Great.
Yeah.
Very good. Let's take one last question from Michael. He's asking, which version of Luminar would you recommend for beginners?
Well, there's really only one version. That's Luminar Neo. Excuse me. So they used to have a couple of versions, one called AI, but then it's effectively, I don't even think it's being sold anymore. So it's really just Luminar Neo. And it's got an amazing, so this is going to sound intimidating, but please don't let it be. It's got an amazing array of all these different tools and filters and things that you can do. And yet I find it incredibly easy to get to grips with. The UI, I could just show you, right? So the UI, you can see here, if I go into the catalog view, this is single image edits. There's that edit that we just did. And a lot of these are random things. So, but you can come in here, and this is that demo files folder I talked about. You can come in here and you can just take a photo and say, hey, I like this photo, and you can go to presets if you want and pick a preset to apply. You can pop over to edits and just go straight to editing. And then you've got all these tools over here as soon as it builds out. Like I can straighten this one because it's crooked. My photos are always crooked. I think I need to see a chiropractor, but you've got layers, you've got a lot of these tools, but they're all pretty easy to get to grips with. And then, I know people like yours truly, who's got I've got an entire playlist of getting started videos on YouTube for Luminar Neo. It's called Beginner Series or Getting Started Series or something like that. If you look on my YouTube channel, it's like the third or fourth playlist down, but it's like 12 videos that'll help you start from literally nothing, not knowing anything about Luminar, all the way to being very comfortable with it. And then I make videos every week about it. Most recent one was yesterday. So there's always something that I'm talking about with Luminar. It's incredibly powerful. I find that it gives me easy and yet really powerful control over the light and the detail and the color, which are really the three things that are, to me, are in a photograph, right? There's light, there's some detail, and there's some color, and those are the kind of things that I tend to manipulate in an image edit. And Luminar just gives you quick and powerful control over all that. So it's out there if you want to check it out. But yeah, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, great. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. Jim, can you bring up your slide? Jonathan was also asking about your YouTube channel. So
yeah, absolutely. Let me share again. Hang on. I stopped sharing, of course, at the wrong time. Let me see. How about that? Is that me?
Yep,
did that come through?
That's you.
Okay.
Yep, we see it.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, that's me. YouTube is just Jim Nix. If you look for me, you'll find me. I've got. I looked today. It's like 995 video or something like. It's almost 1,000 videos. I've been doing it for about 5 or 6 years. A lot of them are, going back. Obviously, going back 5, 6 years. There's old versions of Luminar. You can disregard that, but on the main page on Jim Nix on YouTube, you'll see my various some of my more popular playlists and some of the apps that I do more education about. So you can find me there. And like I said, you get free presets for Luminar if you subscribe to my newsletter on my website. But those are the primary links. I'm also on Flickr. If you're on Flickr, you can just find me by looking me up. I love Flickr. I think it's great. I'm on Twitter. I don't really do a lot there anymore, but those four right there are the places you'll find me most often, and pretty much in that order.
That's great. Jim, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been really enlightening and inspiring. It's great to see a pro photographer that also uses Mylio for both your professional work and for your non-real cameras, as you say.
Yeah.
But it's really, Mylio is great for everyone. And that's what's so exciting is it's great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
any last words before we close out of here?
From me?
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, no.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay.
How you doing, Jim?
Hey,
Good to
man.
see you.
Yeah.
So when you were on the Mylio account and you took that picture and opened it in Neo,
Yeah.
it didn't show raw in develop.
Well, that's because I added a preset first, and the preset had raw develop used. And so when I went to the edit screen, I was sort of past that, for lack of a better word, but it's a raw file. Because I can show you if you want me to do that real quick. Let me just.
Oh, I believe you.
Well, I mean, hey, we're all visual people here, so let me get back out of this catalog, and it shows up in single image edits, and it's going to be at the top, not at the bottom. Here it is. Let me go to edit, and well, you can see it was a raw file set it right there. But also, let me just click on edits, and there's develop raw, and this preset just includes some develop raw settings, which are right there. But anyway, it was a raw file.
Okay.
So, does that help?
Visual works.
Yeah.
So see that at first. And I will tell you guys, this new Neo really slowed down my workflow. And I found I had to buy a solid state drive for all my backups. Now, I don't know if that G drive is solid state, but boy, that made a heck of a difference.
Yeah, it is not. It's 18 terabytes, and an SSD, if you could even get them at 18 terabytes, which I don't think you can, would be like $700 million or something that I cannot afford. So I need to save my money for more cameras and lenses, because my list of in my library stats is not long enough. I need more gear, apparently. But no, I mean, yeah, SSD is huge and fast and amazing, and I highly recommend it. It's just that I don't think they make SSDs big enough to hold all my files, and so I'm stuck with spinning disk for these for the foreseeable future. So, but yeah, it is a great point. That would totally help, Paul.
Yeah, the 4 terabyte kind of took care of me, but
good.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So Matt's saying you can get the 18 terabyte SSD, but they are enterprise drives. Don't even ask about the cost on those. So yeah. They're very expensive.
Yeah. No, I mean, SSDs are just crazy. If they're enterprise drives, is that for sticking in a rack? Then it's probably not even in its own enclosure. Like these drives are standalone with the little feet, and you can just stack them. That's what I mean, they're heavy and they're big. I don't travel with it, and that's one thing I don't do really with Mylio is I have everything on my laptop, and so my laptop is with me, which means the 18 terabyte is at home without me, which means it's not turned on. So when I'm traveling, the beauty of Mylio is I could get to all my originals even if I'm somewhere else, but I can't with my current setup. And so I was actually talking this morning to someone else about that. And maybe in the future, I'll have like a Mac Mini set up at home and just leave that drive plugged in and turned on. So if I'm somewhere around the world, I can just get to them still. Yeah. What was that, Darren?
Can I just add, Jim, that I found the same thing when I first got Mylio. My laptop was taken over as being the host computer. So I ended up getting a small G4, an old secondhand G4 HP, and that's sitting over in the corner over there now, and it's doing a wonderful job. I can travel like I had recently with my laptop, my phone. It's going continuously, and it's got the 2-volt drives connected to it. So It's magic. Yeah, and it's a great idea.
Yeah, that's the beauty of Mylio. So just it's such a great idea.
Yeah.
And just a last note here, Matt's saying that the enterprise are storage arrays. So
Matt Nichols. Hey Matt, are you there? I didn't see you. I don't see everybody.
He's there.
Hello, Matt. Hey Matt.
All right.
There he is. Hey buddy. Good to see you, man. Matt was in Iceland, so he can attest to the fact that it's incredible and magical and insane. So right, Matt?
Yeah, it was a pretty amazing trip.
It was absolutely that. Yeah. So cool. Good to see you. It's been a while.
2 conference calls going on at once here, trying to listen to both.
No worries.
All right.
Awesome. Okay.
Well, want to thank everybody for joining us today. Hope you'll join us for another coffee break. Jim, fantastic. You did a wonderful job showing your images and how you use Mylio, and we really enjoyed it. So thanks everyone. Hope to see you again.
Good to see you guys. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Laurie.
Bye-bye.